So welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is MisterET, and today we continue tearing into this 2013 Mazda 3. But before we go any further with actual teardown, we want to make sure that we'll be able to remove and install the new engine. So I ended up purchasing an engine hoist, and it's actually these two boxes here. It's only 1 ton, but this is a very light engine. So what we're going to do for the start of today's vlog is we're actually going to start assembling these. Then we're going to get this guy in the air here, and I'm going to get this on an engine stand so we can start preparing it for the swap, and we can start cleaning it up and everything. And so we're back. So I was hoping to do this time lapse of me assembling this guy here, but as you can see, we're all done, and I only got 30 minutes of it. So I figured out after starting the time lapse and it failing on me that I need to configure this camera so it works properly. So we'll know for next time, but for this time, wah wah wah. So we've actually made some progress here, and unfortunately this part here is held by a zip tie. I'm actually missing the through bolt that goes through this. Looked at all the boxes that are sitting here, and unfortunately it didn't actually come with the kit. So I'm gonna go grab a bolt here so we can get this started, and I'm gonna go grab the engine stand for this as well so we can get this mounted there. Before we do that, I'm actually going to show you guys what it looks like, because I did a little bit more work off camera on the front of this car. So as you can see, we've got the shifter mechanism here is loose. We've got a whole bunch of wiring here that's loose on the front. The whole front of this is now loose and off. We've started going around this loom. This is all off. We've started working on the back side here. You just grab a light. And now I'm at the point where I'm trying to remove this piece here that's on the back of the alternator. And I've got the top bolt off, and I'm trying to find the bottom bolt. And now that most of all of this is loose, what we have left to do is actually remove the wheels, remove the axles on either side, remove the back engine mount. There's 2 at the top here, and there's a few more wires at the back, as well as the downpipe to disconnect. So let's remove the wheels. So as you can see, these tires are really done. On the outside, there's probably 4/32 left, and on the inside, they're actually corded all the way. So you can see that this has some pretty good camber wear, so this car was definitely lowered at some point. Let's remove the wheel on the other side. And this is the wheel on the other side, so this one is actually even worse. It's actually got the metal showing all the way across. The inside's actually used up even more. There is more wear on this one than the one on the other side, so this car will likely need an alignment at some point in its future as well. So if we look at this, the next part to this is actually removing the axle from each side. So we're going to need to remove this 32 millimeter axle nut, and it doesn't look like it's ever been removed in its life. So I've got this impact gun that has 700 pound-feet of torque, and hopefully that's going to be enough to remove it. So let's give this a try. Okay, so let's try this again. Not coming off. So the impact did not work. So time to take out the BFB. Let's try this out again. Yeah. So we broke the reducer, so we're going to go with the 32 mil 3/4 inch on there. So this is usually where I break this or the nut comes off. And I think we're good. So, finally got this thing off. It took, basically, this here is done. So there's a crack here. Hopefully you can see it. And there's another bigger crack over here. Tried using this 3/4 to 1/2 inch reducer. Bad idea. Broke that. Thought I might break it. I was hoping I wouldn't. And then I used the big effing bar and another 32 millimeter that is a 12 point with a 3/4 on the back here, and that ended up being able to remove it. So I asked my wife to sit in the car, hold the steering wheel, press on the brakes as hard as she could, and we finally got those bad boys off. So the next piece to this is I need to figure out how to disconnect this so this can slide out here. So if we look back here, the axle is in there and it's held at the top over here. So there's a bolt on the other side that I need to undo. That's right over here. And then at the bottom, I actually need to slide this thing out of that carrier here. So there's a bolt on the other side, right over here, that I need to undo. And then I need to slide this out of both sections. So I'll have to see. I think I'm just going to slide the bottom piece out. And looking online, it looks like it's a PETA, so that's the next step for us. So as you can see, guys, removing axles is not an easy job. If you look at my face, if you look at the sweat that's on there, and in a second, if you look at what's on the ground, you'll understand why I'm having so much trouble. So let's have a look. There is the driver's side axle. It is now 4 hours later than when I started this. I didn't film the whole process because it would have been very, very tedious. And you're asking yourself, why the hell is the whole suspension on the ground here? Why is the brake caliper there? And why have I removed absolutely everything here? So on the ground here is what I found when I started removing things. So this is actually the bolt and the nut that goes at the very bottom here of the suspension. That actually broke in there. So I was actually able, once I removed the brake caliper from the hub and everything there, to remove that. But what I also found was this nut, which goes all the way on the top here of this, was actually just hanging out there and just broken off. So if you look at the top here, there's actually this bolt that is broken off. So I'm gonna have to drill this out, get one of these new bolts from Mazda, and we're gonna make the suspension whole again, because 2 of the 3 bolts on the top hat were holding this in there, and I want to make sure that when I go and drive this, it's in tip-top shape. So we're gonna fix this. So that's why I ended up removing all of this, so I could fix those 2 issues. So new day again, new haircut. We're having some trouble with the axles. We've got one out. We've ordered a bunch of things. You see them here on the workbench. So let me just show you what we're working on today. So these bolts here are on order. We've got 5 liters or 5 quarts of oil. We've got a new serpentine belt. We've got a new filter and gasket, crush washer gasket here. We've got 1 quart of automatic transmission fluid for the clutch, and we've got basically 2 gallons of antifreeze for when we fill this back up. So that's what we have right now. I need a link kit and those 2 bolts, and I also need some manual transmission fluid that's been ordered, and that should be here pretty soon. So what we're doing right now is we're going to be assembling this engine stand so we can put the engine that's going into the car on there, and we can start working on that and transferring some parts over. So let's get a time lapse of this going. And there we go. I've had this bad boy for a number of years, so we're just gonna have to set these here to where the transmission bolts or the transmission housing bolts go on the engine, and then we'll be able to mount the engine to this. So after a bit of work here, as you can see, success. So all we have to do now is actually hammer this down, and this requires quite a bit of force. So we get to disconnect this from the lower control arm, and then we'll be able to swing this thing out and remove the axle from that side as well. And as you can see, if you look at this bolt here, I tried hammering on the other end to get it to come out like that. And anytime you're doing that, always make sure that you have the nut on there so you're not destroying the threads and mushrooming the end of this bolt. So as you can see, I can still move this around even though I was hammering on it. So that's a little quick tip here that you absolutely want to use if you're hammering on the end of a bolt to try and get it to come out because it's seized. So now let's hammer away at this and try and get this out of the way. So one of the things that we'll need to do is probably spread this out here. So I'm going to get something in here so we can hopefully spread this out and this will come down a bit easier. And there it is, we are out. So as you can see, this needs to go down quite a bit for this to be released from that knuckle. If you can do this and remove it from this here, you can likely do this swap. This is the hardest part to do mechanically because this requires a tremendous amount of force to remove it. I'm sure Mazda makes a special tool for this, which of course most people will not have. So hammering down on this will get this pressed out and you will then be able to remove. I had to remove my brake caliper, and as you can see it comes with the disc because there's a little lip here and it was difficult to remove, and I'm gonna be reusing these, so decided just to remove it to be able to get this bolt out of here. And now that this is out of the way, we can actually hit it from the backside there and remove the half shaft so that we have access and we can continue removing this engine. Okay, so we're getting pretty close here. So over the last, I would say couple hours, we've removed the axle on this side. The half shaft is just about removed as well. I've removed the tensioner over here, transferred it over. I'm gonna have an extra crank position sensor, because this engine came with one here. The axle is just sitting over here with a couple bolts from the half shaft. That's removed as well. Now if we look at the engine a bit closer here, there's no more wiring on this side. I've unplugged the alternator over here and actually removed the shield that was above it. I've disconnected the O2 sensor from the downpipe. The downpipe still needs to be unhooked from the exhaust. On this side, most of the wiring is actually removed. I have got, if you guys can see it there, I've got one of the heater hoses that's still holding on. And aside from that, most of the wiring, the shift linkage, the clutch lines and everything are disconnected. So I've got about 15 or so minutes left of work, and then we should be able to pull this thing out. So guys, I've just removed the starter and look at what I found just behind it. Look at this beautiful hole. So the block is destroyed both at the front and at the back. Does not seem to have damaged the flywheel. That looks okay. And if we look at the starter itself, that took a bit of a hit, as you can see in the middle there. And there's a bit of cleanup to do over here, but that should be reusable. Well guys, after many hours, we are finally here. So we've got the engine crane hooked up. We've got most of the engine mounts removed. I've got one bolt left, and then this thing should be completely free. So here's what this bad boy looks like. We'll get it up in the air in our next episode. We'll start removing all of the accessories to transfer it over to this other engine that is now on the engine stand. We'll do a bit of cleanup here, and in a follow-up episode, I'm actually going to take this whole engine here apart, and we'll have a look at what actually broke and what it looks like and the carnage and everything. So there it is, guys. This engine is out, and I'm quite dirty and tired. But as you can see, this is something you can do by yourself in your garage with a few tools. So this is going to be it for today's episode. Stay tuned for our next episode. And if you haven't already done so, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, because there's a ton more episodes like this one coming your way.